Texas, United States, a region of empty roads, isolated ranches, and silent dawns. Too silent for those who know how to hear the right signs. What you're about to see in this video didn't appear in the news, didn't make headlines, and was never officially confirmed. But on that particular night, something went completely out of control. A miscalculation, an invasion at the wrong time. An owner who wasn't just a farmer. Without revealing anything about what's to come, just know this: what began at 3 a.m. changed the destiny of everyone involved and transformed a forgotten place in Texas into the stage for a decision no one expected. There are times when running away isn't an option, and there are nights when those who seem trapped are actually waiting. Welcome to this video about untold stories in the United States. Before we begin, I invite you to actively participate in this story. Let us know in the comments where you're listening from right now and the exact time. This helps the channel grow and shows how far these stories are reaching. Now, take a deep breath, because what happened that morning didn't end when the sun rose. At 3 a.m. in the morning, the ranch seemed dead. No wind, no crickets, not even the old creaking of the wooden fence that used to complain when the Texas desert cold bit. It was that kind of silence that doesn't soothe, it warns. The ranch owner woke before the noise. He always did. The habit hadn't left him after retirement. His body remembered what his mind pretended to forget. He opened his eyes in total darkness and lay motionless, counting his own breaths. 3 seconds, 4, 5. The digital clock showed 3 hours in dull red, exactly the time he hated most. It wasn't the dog barking, it wasn't the cattle moving. It was a mistake too small for any civilian to notice. The distant light on the secondary road blinked twice and disappeared. Headlights off while driving. Discipline. He slid his hand to the side of the bed and touched the cold metal of the low safe. He didn't open it yet. First he listened. The ranch had its own sounds: wood, wind, metal. What he heard didn't belong there. A dry, controlled crack. Boots stomping on gravel with even weight. "They've arrived," he murmured to himself, without moving his lips. For 22 years he had been trained to recognize human patterns in hostile environments. As a SWAT lieutenant, he had learned that violence doesn't announce its arrival with shouts. It sneaks up, and now it was there. The main house was in the center of the property, an old barn 50 meters away, a tool shed to the north, a line of dry trees to the south, perfect for a covert approach. He had chosen that place precisely for that reason, an open field of vision. Anyone who came there needed to expose themselves, or so he thought. He stood up slowly, barefoot, feeling the cold floor. He opened the safe. The click was muffled by the palm of his hand. Inside, what remained of a life he had sworn to abandon. He took only what he needed, nothing excessive, nothing noisy. When he reached the side window, he pulled the curtain back 2 centimeters. Just enough. The ranch was dark, but darkness can see too. He counted 4 shadows moving near the barn, 2 more behind, coordinating. They weren't opportunistic thieves. There was a method to it. There was a hierarchy. The kitchen radio, which had been off for months, cracked once. A short, deliberate noise. A signal. The former lieutenant closed his eyes for half a second. He knew that trick. It was used to provoke a reaction, to gauge response, to assess whether the target was armed or frightened. He didn't react. The shadows advanced. Now there were 6, then 8, all with the same rhythm, the same spacing. One of them wore a low-profile cap. Another limped slightly. The leader walked in the center, hands free, too confident for someone entering private property at 3 in the morning. And then he saw something that made his stomach churn. Tattoos on the neck, even from a distance. Thick lines, familiar symbols. This wasn't a typical robbery. This was contested territory. This was a message. MS-13 didn't knock. They invaded. And when they chose a place as isolated as that ranch, they weren't just there for the money. They were there to test, to mark, to see how far someone could go before breaking. The former lieutenant felt the familiar weight in his chest. Not fear, but calculation. SWAT had taught him something simple. Survival begins with information. He needed to know if he was alone on that list, or if that night was part of something bigger. One of the men separated from the group and went to the generator. 2 seconds later, the entire ranch was plunged into even deeper darkness. Power cut, manual, planned, professionals, he thought. He stepped back from the window and positioned himself in the narrow hallway that connected the bedrooms to the living room. There, anyone who entered would have only one option: to advance in a line. The hallway smelled of old wood and oil. The silence was now broken by footsteps. "Boots on the porch," a low laugh, whispered Spanish. The doorknob turned slowly. They didn't break in. They opened the door. That was worse. The door moved only a few centimeters. A weak flashlight swept across the floor. They wanted to see him move. They wanted to confirm the house was empty. The former lieutenant remained motionless, pressing his back against the wall, breathing through his nose, counting the seconds as he had done hundreds of times in similar hallways. Except those were in city buildings, not in the middle of nowhere. One of the invaders went in, then another. He heard the metallic sound of a gun being adjusted, not cocked, checked. The leader spoke softly but firmly. "He's here. I can feel it." The former lieutenant closed his eyes for a moment, not out of fear, but because he understood something in that second. They knew who he was. This was no coincidence. This wasn't just any ranch. It was him. And then from outside, an unexpected noise cut through the night. The iron gate at the back of the property opened with a long creak, like a wounded animal. They all froze. The leader raised his hand, ordering absolute silence. The former lieutenant felt something he hadn't felt in years, the certainty that this early morning would not end like the others, because someone else had just entered the ranch, and nobody there knew which side this new presence was on. The creaking of the gate echoed across the grounds like an irreversible mistake. It wasn't just noise, it was presence. Everyone inside the house understood this at once. The leader of the invasion raised his hand, fist clenched, and the men froze. None of them spoke now. None dared to breathe aloud. The former SWAT lieutenant felt his pulse quicken, but his mind remained cool. The gate at the back of the ranch didn't open on its own. He himself had reinforced that structure years before, after receiving a veiled threat by phone. To open it, someone needed to know the mechanism, or force it open calmly, without haste. They weren't alone, he thought. The flashlight in the intruder's hand swept down the corridor once more. The beam of light passed less than a meter from the ex-lieutenant's face, reflecting for a second off the opaque metal of the weapon concealed against his body. The intruder didn't notice. Training saved that moment. Outside, footsteps began to move. Not hurried, not rushed, measured. The kind of footsteps of someone who knows they've been noticed and doesn't care. The leader of the MS-13 men tilted his head slightly, listening. He also recognized patterns. This was no local resident. This was no police officer. This was someone accustomed to entering hostile territory. "Who the hell?" whispered one of the men, his voice thick with nervousness. The leader made a short gesture, cutting the question off in midair. Two men retreated to the front door, positioning themselves at opposite angles. Two others moved to the kitchen. One stayed in the hallway. Classic mistake, thought the former lieutenant. Separating forces in unfamiliar territory. He needed to decide quickly. There were two threats now, those already inside and those who were coming. The sound of the gate ceased. Silence returned, heavier, denser. Then a short whistle pierced the night. A signal. It wasn't from the gang. It wasn't civilian. It was tactical. The leader sensed it too. He turned slowly, assessing the room, the hallway, the non-existent staircase. The house was single-story, simple, but danger now came from all sides. "Change the plan," he murmured. The former lieutenant sensed the shift in energy in the air. Before, they were hunting. Now they were being tested. A dry shot rang out outside. It wasn't to kill. It was to announce something. The shot struck the wooden post near the barn, scattering splinters in the darkness. Immediately, the gang members reacted. Guns raised, muffled shouts, running footsteps. The entire ranch awoke like a wounded animal. "Get out, now!" someone shouted. The corridor ahead of the former lieutenant emptied in seconds. The invaders retreated, trying to understand the new threat. That was the only window he would have. He took 2 steps forward, silently pressing himself against the wall. His heart pounded, but his mind was doing calculations. How many men, how many weapons, how many exits? He couldn't face them all, but he didn't need to. Outside, voices overlapped. Quick Spanish, contradictory orders. A second shot, now closer. Then a third, lower, more controlled. Professional response. The former lieutenant recognized the pattern. This wasn't your average rival gang. This wasn't an armed resident defending property. This was someone who had been trained. He felt a shiver that had nothing to do with fear. The kitchen door burst open. One of the MS-13 officers rushed in, eyes wide, blood dripping from his arm. "They're surrounding us," he said, breathless. "Who?" asked the leader, his composure now cracking. Before anyone could answer, something struck the exterior wall of the house with force. It didn't explode. It stuck. A second later, later, a short buzzing sound and an electric crackle extinguished the remaining lanterns. Total darkness. "Shit!" someone shouted. The former lieutenant smiled for the first time that night. Not out of pleasure, out of recognition. It was a portable electromagnetic pulse. Rare, expensive, used by specific units. SWAT, or something worse, he thought. But he knew that SWAT didn't operate like that. Not in that area. Not without a warrant. Not at 3 a.m. on a forgotten ranch in Texas. Outside, a firm voice broke through the chaos. "Last chance. Come out unarmed." English. No accent. No emotion. The gang leader clenched his teeth. He knew when he was cornered. He also knew that retreating meant losing prestige, and perhaps his life afterward. "Nady Sale," he replied, loud enough to be heard. The former lieutenant understood at that moment that dawn had just crossed a point of no return. This was no longer an invasion. It was a clash of interests, and he was at the center of it. Outside, footsteps advanced in formation, the metallic sound of weapons being adjusted, a sharp click, 2, 3. The voice returned, now closer. Then stay. The former lieutenant pressed his forehead against the cold wall. He had to choose, reveal himself and become a target, or wait for those men, whoever they were, to sort everything out outside. But before he could decide, something unexpected happened. One of the invaders, too young for that life, looked down the dark corridor and whispered, almost pleading, "There's someone else here." The former lieutenant realized it too late. He had been seen, and now everyone knew. The whisper echoed down the hallway like a silent gunshot. "Hey, alguien más aquí." There was no scream. There was no immediate panic. What came next was worse. Total attention. The former lieutenant felt the focus shift. Before, he was the terrain. Now, he was the target. The MS-13 leader raised his hand again, asking for calm. The chaos outside continued. Footsteps, orders, spaced-out gunshots. But inside the house, time seemed to slow down. He took a step forward, his eyes fixed on the darkness of the hallway. "Salt," he said in English. "We don't want any trouble with you." "That's a lie." The former lieutenant recognized him immediately. The gang didn't leave any loose ends, ever. If he showed up, he'd die. If he didn't show up, he'd die too. Outside, the unfamiliar team began to move. Their approach was clean and measured. Someone counted steps in a low voice. Another marked angles. This confirmed the former lieutenant's suspicion. Advanced training, but not police training. There were no sirens, no formal announcement, just efficiency. He took a deep breath and did the only thing he had learned to do well: decide. He stepped one step out of the shadows, not completely, just enough to be seen. The silhouette appeared at the end of the corridor like a cutout of a man against the darkness. "This is my house," he said, his voice low and firm. "You have the wrong address." For a second, no one answered. The leader tilted his head, assessing the situation. The flashlight failed again, but the moonlight streaming through the side window revealed the detail that changed everything. The ex-lieutenant's posture, relaxed shoulders, weight evenly distributed, hands where they could be seen without trembling. "You're not a farmer," said the leader finally. "And you didn't just come to steal," he replied. The silence was broken by a loud bang outside, a barn door being forced open, a short scream, then nothing. The leader clenched his jaw. This operation was getting out of control. "We have to go," whispered one of the men. "No sin, L," replied the leader, pointing to the corridor. The former lieutenant understood the game. They would take him as a message, as an example. Maybe not even that. Maybe just to make sure no one spoke up afterward. Before they could move forward, a voice from outside cut through the air, closer, louder. "Last warning!" Immediately, the world exploded in motion. One of the invaders fired blindly toward the door. The shot shattered glass. The response came in 2 dry, precise bursts. A body fell onto the porch. The leader shouted orders. The house turned into a labyrinth of running shadows. The ex-lieutenant moved the exact second the hallway emptied. He didn't run. He glided. He leaned against the wall, advanced to the kitchen, and smelled the gunpowder mixed with stale coffee. At the back door, a figure appeared, dressed in black, face covered, handgun pointed firmly. They looked at each other for half a second, just enough. "SWAT?" the former lieutenant asked, almost reflexively. "No," the figure replied, "and you shouldn't be here. I live here." The figure hesitated. An almost imperceptible detail, the finger off the trigger. That saved both their lives. "Then lower it," she said. "Now!" Another shot shattered the wooden door. The figure pulled the former lieutenant back, pinning him against the wall. A second person appeared, blocking the hallway. "Do we have any civilians?" someone asked over the radio. "One," replied the figure, "and it knows how to move." Outside Outside, the confrontation intensified. The gang tried to escape through the open field, but the terrain worked against them. Every fence, every ditch, every dry tree became a trap. The MS-13 leader appeared at the front door, wounded but standing. He looked inside the house one last time, his eyes meeting those of the former lieutenant. "It doesn't end here," he said, spitting blood. Before he could complete his threat, a shot knocked him back, and he disappeared into the darkness. Silence returned gradually. A different kind of silence, not a warning silence, a consequential one. The figure who had protected him lowered his weapon and stared at the former lieutenant with renewed attention. "Who are you?" he asked. He thought for a moment before answering. Someone who thought they had left that life behind. Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten. Dawn was drawing to a close. But the former lieutenant knew what had begun there would not end with the sunrise, because now more people knew who he was, and someone, somewhere, would decide the next move. The first glimmer of dawn revealed what the night had concealed. Bullet holes in the facade, shattered glass on the porch, footprints crisscrossing the gravel like lines on a map no one wanted to follow. The ranch breathed in sobs. The former lieutenant stood motionless for a few seconds, letting his body come out of combat mode. Only then did he notice the dried blood on his sleeve. It wasn't his. The team dressed in black moved with clinical precision. 2 men swept the perimeter, another checked the barn, a fourth collected capsules from the ground, choosing which ones to take and which ones to leave. Selective cleaning. This wasn't policing. "Identification," said the woman who had pulled him against the wall, now without her mask. Light eyes, tired face. "Name, now," he answered without hesitation. The surname fell like a stone in the air. One of the men interrupted his sweep and turned his face away. The woman closed her eyes for a moment. "I thought you were dead," she said. "Almost," he replied. "Sometimes." She made a brief gesture. The radio crackled. Outside, someone confirmed the perimeter was clear. The sun was still weak, but the early morning hours had officially ended. "Do you know who we are?" she asked. "I know who they are not," he said, "and I know they came for them, not for me." The woman tilted her head, assessing the situation. "At first, yes. But that changed when you decided to move like someone who was trained." He wasn't offended. It was a technical compliment. "And you're not federal agents, not with this silence." "We're the kind of people who solve problems before they become headline news," she replied. "Sometimes after." The former lieutenant looked at the barn, where a body covered by a tarp awaited a decision. "They'll be back. MS-13 always comes back," the woman said, "especially when someone hurts their pride." She motioned for him to follow her to the kitchen. There on the table were quickly printed photos, tattoos, faces, a symbol scratched on the back of an envelope, a map of Texas with routes marked in red. "They crossed the border yesterday," she explained. "They came to collect on an old favor, an informant who disappeared. The last signal from his phone was from nearby. I don't owe any favors to any gang," said the former lieutenant. "No, but someone thinks you should." She turned one of the photos over. A young face, hard eyes. "That's the leader's son who landed on your doorstep. He believes you were responsible for an operation years ago, one that shattered his family." The former lieutenant felt the weight of the past fall on his shoulders. He remembered the building, the narrow corridor, the muffled scream when the door fell. He remembered the report that was never published. That was official work. "Officially, no," she said. "Officially, you've never been there." Silence. The radio crackled again. A voice reported that a suspicious vehicle had been found abandoned 2 kilometers away. Engine overheated. Hasty retreat. "They left a trail," the woman said, "and that's rare." "Or intentional," he retorted. "Message," she nodded. "That's why we're here." The woman approached and lowered her voice. "We need you, not as a sniper, as a scene reader. They know your name. They'll use it to lure others." "Oh, what if I refuse? They try again, with more people, with less care." He looked around the simple kitchen, the place he had chosen to disappear into. "So, it's not a choice." "It never is," she said. Outside, one of the men called out. Something had been found on the porch, a mark made with a knife in the wood, a simple symbol, recognizable. The woman took a deep breath. "It's personal," she said. "For you." The former lieutenant ran his finger along the mark. "They want to drag me out of hiding." "They succeeded," she replied. "Now we need to decide where you'll be visible." He straightened his shoulders. The life he had tried to abandon had just come knocking at the door. Literally. "Tell your boss I'm coming in, on one condition." "Which?" "I choose the next place." She stared at him for a second that was far too long. Then she nodded. "Deal." Outside, the sun finally broke through the clouds. A new day was beginning, and with it, a hunt that wouldn't end at that ranch. The new hideout didn't look like a hideout. That's what made it perfect. A low house, forgotten by recent maps, lost among back roads where the asphalt gives way to dust and cell phones lose signal due to the terrain's whims. There, the former lieutenant chose to remain visible, enough to be noticed by those who hunted him, invisible to everyone else. The team, dressed in black, set up the briefing in the main room. An open map lay on the table. Routes sketched in pencil, times, distances, windows of opportunity measured in seconds, not minutes. He observed silently, reading between the lines. Those who talk too much make mistakes. Those who observe survive. They'll bite, said the woman with the light eyes, pointing to the road east. They always bite when they think their prey has become exposed out of exhaustion. Not from tiredness, he corrected. From pride. She nodded. Out of pride, then. The plan was too simple to be innocent. A short, deliberately detectable nighttime drive. A vehicle with clean plates, a warm engine, and an easy trail. A second car in the shadows, cutting corners. The house would be empty for 2 hours. Enough time for someone to confirm the absence and alert the hunt. Who's leaking? He finally asked. Silence was answer enough. There's always someone, he added. The question is whether we get to decide who. The woman took a deep breath. We have no proof. We have time, he said, and time reveals more than it proves. At 10:40 p.m. they left. The sky was low, starless, perfect for concealing movement. The former lieutenant sat in the passenger seat, eyes on the rearview mirror, reading reflections as if they were words. The road snaked. A distant headlight blinked twice and went out. An old code. He memorized it. Mark this, he murmured. I've already booked it, she replied, without taking her eyes off the track. 15 minutes later, the trap began to close. An old truck appeared ahead, too slow to be accidental. The driver slowed down. Behind, a second vehicle pulled up, its high beams flashing for half a second. A provocation. The former lieutenant felt his body revert to its old rhythm, the world narrowing. Now, he said. The car in front swerved onto the shoulder. The truck stopped across the road. The road became a bottleneck. Doors opened. Armed silhouettes emerged from nowhere, as if the night had given birth to them. Tattoos on their necks, covered arms, exaggerated confidence. MS-13. The first shot wasn't theirs. A dry shot that shattered the truck's rearview mirror. The second knocked out a headlight. The third sent someone falling to their knees, more from shock than injury. The team in black revealed themselves in layers. Cross-angle shots, controlled fire, terrain dominance. Come out unarmed, the woman shouted. Now! There was a response. There always is. Short bursts, wrong, nervous. The difference between training and habit is measured in the first 3 seconds. The ex-lieutenant got out of the car already moving, covering the side, feeling the ground, hearing the metal sing. He wasn't looking for targets. He was looking for mistakes. He saw one. A man ran against the wind, trying to flank through the ditch. The former lieutenant took 2 steps forward, shouted to fix the situation, and the team closed in. The man fell, not dead, contained. We have a live player, he announced. The shooting stopped as quickly as it had begun. Night returned to its normal state. On the roadside, weapons were sheathed, hands on the ground, breaths ragged. One of them trembled more than the others, not from fear, from guilt. It's him, said the former lieutenant, pointing with his chin. The one who talked too much. The woman approached, her flashlight dimmed. The man looked away. I just confirmed it, he stammered. It wasn't supposed to end like this. It never is, she replied. While the team cordoned off the area, the former lieutenant walked to the truck. On the bumper, a new mark, hastily applied. The same symbol as the ranch's timber, a signature. He ran his finger over it and felt the certainty chill down his spine. They wanted this, he said, turning around. They wanted us to react here. They wanted to gauge our response. They measured it, the woman replied. They overestimated, he retorted. And now they know how we hunt. A radio crackled. A distant voice reported movement to the north, outside the planned perimeter. A vehicle had escaped before the roadblock. Bait. The former lieutenant closed his eyes for half a second. The plan leaked, he said, but not the whole thing. She stared at him. What do you mean? Because whoever leaked it didn't know where I would be when it was all over. In the distance, an engine revved and disappeared into the darkness, carrying the wrong message to those who expected answers. The former lieutenant smiled without joy. Now they'll come in a hurry, he concluded, and haste makes good people make mistakes. The woman nodded, already reorganizing the team. Then the next move is yours. He looked at the empty road, at the trail of light dying on the Texas horizon. No, he corrected, the next move is theirs. And when they came, they wouldn't find a man running away. They would find an invitation. Haste has a sound. It's not the engine revving or the hurried pace. It's the mistake that arises when someone believes that time is on their side. The former lieutenant heard this sound before any other, still in the back seat of the second vehicle, while the team was redeploying after the ambush on the road. "They're going to shorten it," he said. "They're going to cut protocols, trade silence for speed." The woman nodded, already relaying orders over the radio. The plan changed without formal announcement. Only those who needed to know knew. The team fragmented into smaller cells, each with a simple function: watch, restrain, push. No one would stand still. The location chosen for the next step was deliberately improbable: an abandoned chapel miles from the nearest town, surrounded by hard ground and twisted trees. A place where any approach would be visible from 100 meters away, and where the night offered no shelter. In Texas, places like that are natural traps. "They hate open spaces," murmured the former lieutenant, assessing the angles. "They prefer alleys, corridors, houses." "Then why come here?" asked one of the operators. "Because they are angry," he replied. "And anger seeks certainty, not advantage." Shortly after midnight, the signs began. A distant lighthouse went out too early. A radio picked up a short, poorly encoded transmission. An engine was left running too long behind a rise. "Hurry. Likely contact in 5, the woman warned. The ex-lieutenant adjusted his position, his back to the chapel wall, feeling the roughness of the old paint under his fingers. The place had echoes. Each step would sound like 2, perfect for confusing anyone coming too fast. They came. First 2, then 3 more. Silhouettes appearing and disappearing at the edge of vision. One of the men tripped on an exposed root and cursed under his breath. Another pointed his gun at nothing and fired reflexively. Mistake after mistake. "Hold on," the woman whispered into the radio. "Wait until it closes." When the MS-13 advanced cell crossed the invisible line, the world contracted. Lights burst. Firm voices cut through the night. 2 men dropped their weapons. One tried to run and fell with the wind. The other reacted too late. The former lieutenant didn't celebrate. He observed the faces. He was looking for someone specific, and he found them. "That one," he said, indicating the man in the dark jacket who kept his gaze on the ground. "Don't handcuff him yet." The woman approached. "Why?" "Because he knows," he replied, "and he's going to try to negotiate." Minutes later, away from the noise in the shadow of the chapel, the man spoke, not out of torture, out of calculation. He gave up routes, names, schedules. He confirmed what the former lieutenant had suspected since the ranch. The invasion was only the beginning. There was a second team coming from the south, carrying something bigger than weapons. Intent. "They want you to be visible," the man said, his voice faltering. "They want you to choose a place and stay there." The former lieutenant exchanged a glance with the woman. "I've already chosen." "Where?" she asked. He pointed to the horizon, where the sky was beginning to lighten to a pale grey. "Where they think they rule." The decision proved costly. During the retreat, one of the operators was hit by shrapnel from a late-firing shot. Not fatal, but enough to remind everyone that no one gets away unscathed. The former lieutenant helped carry the stretcher, feeling the true weight of the choice he had made. "Was it worth it?" the woman asked when silence returned. He didn't answer immediately. He looked at the empty chapel, at the marks on the floor, at the fading night. "It's not over yet," he said. "The right question is, will it end the right way?" In the distance, an engine started and sped away. Messages would be carried. Names would be repeated. His, especially. "They're coming," the woman concluded. "I know," he replied, "and this time I'll be waiting." The sky cleared a little more. The counter-hunt was underway, and the human cost, now visible, made turning back impossible. The chosen location was no secret. It was a provocation. The former lieutenant returned to the ranch at dawn, when the sky was still undecided between night and day. The dust hung low, as if the ground were holding its breath. He wanted them to know. He wanted them to come. On the radio, the team in black confirmed positions with short, emotionless phrases. It wasn't bravado, it was mathematics. "They're on their way," the woman warned. 2 vehicles confirmed, others may be coming from off route. He observed the long road that cut across the field. There, any approach was visible, any mistake fatal. "Let them in up to the edge," he said. "Then close it off." The sun touched the horizon when the engines appeared. There was no attempt at surprise. There was no negotiation. MS-13 came with what it had: tired men, accumulated anger, the misguided belief that numbers solve everything. It had solved it before, not there. The first shot was a warning no one asked for. The response came from cross angles, short, precise. The ranch ranch, now prepared, absorbed the impact. Fences became cover, ditches, bottlenecks. The ex-lieutenant moved with old-fashioned calm, calling for advances, cutting off retreats, pushing the pressure where he wanted it. Control of rhythm. Now, he said on the radio, the encirclement closed in. One vehicle attempted to break through the southern flank and died in its own impulse. Another stopped, doors open, hands reaching up too late. There were shouts. There was silence. There was the dry sound of decisions made at the last minute. The leader finally appeared, wounded but standing tall, pride to the last inch. He faced the former lieutenant in the open, without cover. "Did you think it would end like this?" he spat. "I thought it would end here," the former lieutenant replied. "With you choosing to stop." The leader looked around. He saw the calculation. He understood the mistake. He lowered his weapon. When everything ceased, the day was already bright. The team made the final sweep. There were prisoners. There were wounded. There was no celebration. The former lieutenant sat on the porch step, feeling the weight of the years finally catch up with him. The woman approached. "It's over." He looked at the empty Texas road. "For today." She nodded. "Are you going to disappear again?" He thought of the ranch, the dust, the silence that now no longer signaled anything. "No." He stood up. "Oh, now they know where to find me." The radio crackled one last time, confirming the retreat. The former lieutenant took a deep breath. The life he had tried to leave behind had taken its toll, but for the first time in years, the silence didn't weigh him down, because at first light the hunt was over, and those who chose to stay survived.